So the idea of respecting property boundaries was very important to the Lord. Now, the Proverbs writer actually says, do not remove the boundary of your father that your fathers set up. So this idea of having boundaries for your property and for what is yours was so important to the Lord that he actually pronounced a curse on people who would violate that. Well, to this day, we still have those same ideas. Whenever a house is bought, the survey is done to find out what the exact boundaries are, and pins are set so that people will know this is mine and this is yours. And it makes perfect sense. Fathers, stand in the gap. Fathers, stand in the gap as boundary setters for their families. That is God's idea. I read something amazing. Can you believe that in 2018 there was a study done that said violent fathers produce violent children? I read in 2017 that absentee fathers contribute to juvenile delinquency. Amazing. I wonder how much money was spent to figure that out. I wonder how much time was devoted. I really wonder, was the theory, we're not sure, but let's just see? We're sure. You are sure. And today, as we think about the fact that fathers have God's instructions, and they either do them or they don't, and we admire those who follow those instructions, I want us today to think for just a minute that fathers stand in the gap. As this is our theme for the year, fathers are those who are standing in the gap for their families. That's what God intends for us to do. Whereas the world is constantly attacking our families from the outside, dads, fathers, stand up and be those who stand in the gap in behalf of your family. A couple of things to consider. Number one, fathers, you are now placing landmarks in your family's lives, whether you know it or not. Whether you know it or not, that's exactly what you're doing, because you know what? Your children are listening to what you say. In Proverbs 2:1, Solomon actually said, "My son, hear my instructions." Also chapter 4 and verse number 10. Well, I know what he was saying. He was saying, I'm going to tell you some good things. You need to listen. What I'm telling all of us that we already know. Oh, they're listening. They're hearing. They know. If you speak this way, they are going to speak this way. If you say these words while they're growing up, they are going to say these words. If you are an angry person and you lash out, they will be angry and they will lash out. You can rest assured. You can rest assured that though Solomon told his son to listen to him, Oh, they're listening to you. They're watching you. Proverbs 4 and verse 11. You watch me, Solomon said, and your walk will be good. What's he saying? Oh, put your eyes on me and I'll show you the path. Let me tell you something. They're watching. There are many powerful images that we keep in our minds. And I remember from many decades back, one of the most powerful images that is stuck in my head on this very topic. Maybe some of you older recall it. There was a father sitting under a tree with his son. And it looked like an idyllic situation. And then Dad reached over to his cigarette pack and he pulled out a cigarette. The next shot of the camera shows his little boy reaching for the pack. Oh, they're watching. What you do, they are watching. But number 3 in chapter 3, discipline is important. Maybe we don't know this at times. Maybe we wonder if this is real or not. But I think most of us have figured it out, maybe sometimes too late. You know what? I believe children, in their innate nature, are looking to Dad and waiting for him to say yes or no. In other words, they won't admit it. In fact, they will fight against it, but children want to know the boundaries. They want to know yes or no. I've said many times, the job of parents is to lay out the boundaries. And the job of children is to test them and see if they will hold. Children do that very well. Sometimes parents don't hold the line as well. Fathers, you, like the landmarks of old, are setting down those landmarks for your children. They are listening, they are watching, and they are waiting. It's happening. If you want to go into the book of Proverbs and walk with me for just a few minutes, let's see some boundaries that our fathers need to be setting. And as we on this day honor those who do well, let us challenge all of us either to do it or to do better, or to place in our minds, if you're not a father yet, one day you will be, possibly. Will you really understand the boundaries that God wants you to set? What are the landmarks that you can count on that your family needs to have? I want to begin in chapter 3 and in verse 27. Number 1, do not withhold good from others, especially when it is in your hand to do so. Lay down the landmark for your children and for your family to compliment others. It is such a great thing to hear someone just go out of his or her way to make a statement, a positive thing about another person. Walking up to them and say, I really appreciate you. Here is something I like about you. Notice what he said. When it is within your hand to do it, then don't withhold the good. Guess what? It is in your hand. It is. today when you take your father out to eat? Will you compliment those who are providing that meal? And if they're doing a really good job, will you say to them, I really appreciate you serving us, and let those children hear that you pass out compliments? Will your children be able to say one day, Dad was a complimentary person. He tried to find something good in everyone and tell them about it. Will you be that father? Will you lay down that landmark? Will you help your children to learn that? Number two, here's a landmark that every father should set down. You all need to spend time with ants. I never had an ant farm. But I think that would be one of the coolest things to have, especially if it's very intricate, so that you could watch how those ants work. If you go to chapter 6, Solomon told his son, spend time with ants. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. For having no guide or overseer or ruler, provides her food in the summer and her food in the winter. Go watch the ants. Why? Because they are constantly busy. I wonder, I've never looked it up. Of course, every time I say something like that, somebody's got a phone. They're going to look it up right now. I don't recommend that. But you can look it up later and tell me if I don't get to it. Do ants sleep? I don't know. Have you ever seen an ant sleeping? If you've ever seen an ant, they're always moving. They're constantly moving. They are busy. They work. You know what, fathers? Teach your children to spend time with ants and learn the value of work. Do children have responsibilities in your home? Do they do chores in your home? I could tell you of a person near and dear who said, I was raised in a home where children were told to have fun and almost had no responsibilities. He turned out well in spite of that. Teach your children to spend time with ants. Let them learn the value of work. Look at chapter 9 and verse 12. If you are wise for yourself. If you scoff, you will bear it alone. Fathers, there may not be something any more important. A couple of these fit our time, one coming later. This is very important. Lay down the landmark that says to your family and to your children, we are not going to look to blame other people for something. I am so tired of an entire society that's trying to figure out a way to blame everybody else for the condition that I am in. I am so tired of trying to figure out a way that we have to announce all of these people are blamed and we all need to change. Well, yes, when we are at fault, we need to change. But I absolutely believe that we have a generation of people who spend their time looking to blame somebody else rather than looking at self and saying, what did I do to create this situation? Fathers, teach your family to take responsibility and don't look to blame other people. Next, chapter 10, verse 4. Fathers, lay down the landmark that tells your children to do their hand exercises. In my truck, a little cubby, I don't know what they call it, but I have one of those things that has springs, and you do like this, and it strengthens, supposedly, this part of your arm. Well, I do that because I like to play golf, and you got to be able to swing and have some power right there. And so I like to do the hand exercises. Look at what he says in chapter 10, verse 4. He that has a slack hand becomes poor, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. Are you teaching your children to do their hand exercises? Because with a slack hand, they will not have what they need to have. But if you teach them to strengthen the hand grip, they can be people who can hold on to what they need in life, and they can enrich themselves and others, because it is important to do your hand exercises. Look at chapter 16 and verse 24. Here's another one. Pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the bones. Fathers, lay down the principle, the landmark in your family that says, I want all of us to have a good vocabulary. A good vocabulary. We want to have good words, not just words of compliment that we've already discussed, but healthy words, healthy speech. I heard the other day of a boy that came home from school, and he said a word he had heard at school, and his dad reached in his pocket and pulled out a quarter. He said, now son, we don't talk like that here. The next day, his boy came home from school and he said, Dad, I have a word today that's worth $1. There has to be a way of teaching and training and making sure that our children have good vocabulary to speak well. They need to speak well. They need to have good thoughts. A good, healthy vocabulary. Why? Because as he said here, it strengthens the bones. It is important. Look at chapter 17 and verse 6. Children's children are the crown of old men, and the glory of children is their father. I hope, fathers, that you are laying down the landmark that says to them, I have a good home, and I want to have another good home later. The home I live in right now is really good, but someday I'm going to have my own home. And I want my home to be as good then as the one I'm living in now. But some fathers create situations where their children are ready to leave home, to get away, and never to come back. So the responsibility is dual. You need to have a good home for them to be in. But number two, as you do that, you are inspiring them to have a good home for their children to live in. Fathers, will you lay down that landmark? Look at verse 22 of chapter 17, a passage, a proverb that you have heard so many times. A merry heart does good like medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bone. I hope that your children, your family, has a healthy prescription in their medicine cabinet to joy. There is nothing that we can do that will disrupt joy if it is there. Oh, there are times when you're happy and then you're sad. But there should never be a time when you're not joyful. Train your family to know what it means to have the joy of the Lord. And as Paul would write to the Thessalonians, rejoice evermore. I hope your medicine cabinet is full of joy. Look at chapter 22 and verse 1. A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches. Fathers, teach your children to value the name that they wear. It is special. It is unique. It is precious. Your name is who you are. Help them to learn how to make something good out of that name. Help them to know this name can carry with it all of these great ideas. This name, when people recall the name in their minds, they can think of these positive things if you will do it. But sadly, you can probably think of a name from your childhood, from your past, or even your present. And immediately that name conjures up all kinds of negative thoughts. And even if you see somebody else totally out of that scenario with the same name, you remember those negative things. Train your children. Train your children to have a name that they make for themselves and that they can appreciate, and others will too. Look at chapter 27, verse 1. Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring forth. Fathers, lay down the landmark that says, live today, and then tomorrow, do that again. Live today, and then tomorrow, live it again. That is, live today, and when tomorrow becomes today, live today. Some families are living in the past. I know of some fathers who are living through their children because they didn't get to do certain things, or they weren't as good in certain things. And so it's all about the fathers getting the thrill of a life they did not enjoy. Don't do that. And don't live in the future thinking that right now is not as important as down there. Yes, the future is important, but you got to live today. I want to close with the idea from chapter 31. It's a text that most of us know well, but it's a text where a king is talking, and he talks first about men, and he talks second about women. Fathers, there may not be a greater challenge today than the challenge for us to stand in the gap, teaching our children to stay in their lane. Someone painted these words on the side of a building here in Richmond. Support trans kids. I want to go and paint under it. Teach them that DNA is the truth. I wonder, is it the case that some males don't act in a way that teaches their sons to be males? And some mothers don't act in a way to teach their daughters to be women? And therefore the confusion comes. I don't know. But I know the truth. You are either male or you are female. Period. Fathers, teach it. We do a lot of things based on top 10. Top 10 reasons for this, top 10 reasons for that. I just gave you and there are plenty of more. There may not be a better instruction book on living every day than the book of Proverbs. I just gave you 10. 10 things that all fathers need to do, laying down the landmarks for their families. Your father has laid down landmarks for you, and he says this: if you want to live in my house eternally, you have to be one of my children. You have to be born again of the water and the Spirit. And being immersed in baptism takes you into the family of that Father. If you're not a child of God, don't you want to be in the family? Maybe you strayed from the family. And like the story of the prodigal, the father is looking to see if you're going to come home. We're here for you today. Meet our shepherds if you need us while we stand and sing.